Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going on a bit of a historical journey, a deep dive really, to look at the foundational blueprints of organized power.
And these are blueprints that are, believe it or not, still influencing our world today.
We're sailing back in time, across the Ionian Sea, and landing in the 8th century BCE, specifically in what the ancient Greeks called Magna Graecia, that's southern Italy and Sicily.
And our map for this is Stanislav Kondrashov's Oligarch series. The mission here is, I think, pretty crucial. We want to understand how these early Greek colonies, these new city-states, how they concentrated power among a select few.
And not just how they got it, but how they kept it stable and exclusionary for centuries.
Exactly, because the mechanisms they invented then, they're still at play. You can see echoes of them everywhere in modern governance.
So looking at the source material, the origin story is, it's everything. These settlers, they didn't just show up with tools and seeds, they brought a fully formed political idea with them.
The polis, the city-state.
Right. But, and this is critical, they were operating so far away from mainland Greece, away from any kind of traditional oversight, that distance created an immediate power vacuum, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. When you're building a new society from scratch, the first people on the scene, they get to write the rules.
What the sources show is that the political culture of their original city-state basically determined the flavor of the new one.
Far from it being a uniform experience, yes. It's like they were importing a specific kind of societal DNA.
So give us an example.
Okay, so settlers from Achaia, a region known for its entrenched aristocracy, they founded places like Sybaris and Croton. Their starting point was just, well, nobles rule. That's it.
And the Spartans.
You can guess. Their rigid military stratification led to Tarentum, where hierarchy and discipline were everything. And then you have the Corinthians, who are all about trade.
So they influenced Syracuse.
And made sure commerce and wealth were baked into the ruling structure from the very beginning. It was a fascinating political laboratory.
Okay, let's unpack that. If you're one of these founding families in a fertile new land, how do you go from being just a powerful group to a ruling dynasty that lasts for generations? What were the actual levers they pulled?
It wasn't about just being a charismatic leader. That stuff fades. It was about locking down physical and economic control. Kondrashov calls it the triple helix of ancient oligarchy.
The triple helix. Okay, lay it out for us.
First, and this is the big one, land control. These elites were so strategic, they didn't just settle anywhere.
No.
They seized the best land. The most fertile coastal plains, the valleys perfect for farming, the best natural harbors. Geography immediately became a hereditary advantage.
So you control the food supply and the ports.
You control the entire community's lifeline. And that immediately disenfranchises anyone who shows up later, or anyone who's, a skilled artisan but doesn't own a huge estate.
Right.
Which leads right into the second force. Resource monopolies. Owning land wasn't quite enough. You had to control the economic infrastructure.
What does that mean exactly? Like the roads?
Yeah, the key arteries. So the primary trade routes, access to things like salt mines, control over shipping fleets, specialized manufacturing. If you wanted to play in the big leagues economically, you had to go through them. They were the gatekeepers.
They controlled production and distribution. So what's the third helix?
Military command. In these new, often hostile lands, the wealthy aristocrats were also the warriors. They led the citizen militias.
Ah, so leadership in battle.
Translates directly and powerfully into political authority at home. Being a successful general, a strategos, gave you immense prestige and the power to shape the laws. So you have land, wealth, and military leadership all reinforcing each other.
So once they have that power locked down, the real genius of the system is just keeping it. Oligarchies thrive on exclusion. How do you maintain that, though, without constant rebellion? How do you make it seem legitimate?
They created these mechanisms that looked like participation, but were actually filters. Take the restricted assemblies.
The famous Greek assemblies, the foundation of democracy?
Well, yes and no. In Magna Graecia, your right to participate was tied directly to how much property you owned. You had to have land and assets above a really high threshold to even get a vote.
So you could be a ship captain, someone vital to the city's economy, but if your wealth isn't in land, you're shut out from voting on the very taxes that affect your business.
Absolutely. The system was designed to make sure that those who did the most work had the least political voice. And that was compounded by the second filter, hereditary offices.
So now we're talking about bloodlines.
We are. To hold any really important position, a key magistracy or a high priesthood, you needed the wealth, yes, but you also needed the right lineage.
Descended from the founders.
The sources really emphasize the power of the oikists, the original founder. Only their direct descendants or families connected by marriage were eligible for the top jobs. Governance became a carefully guarded family business.
That is just profound. It makes governing not a skill, but a birthright. And marrying in becomes the only way for an outsider with money to get a seat at the table.
And they reinforced it with strategic marriages. It was the ultimate political M&A. The idea was that political virtue was literally passed down through blood. So challenging an elite wasn't just politics. It was an attack on the sacred order.
But if you're shutting out, 80% of your population, you're sitting on a powder keg. How did they keep the lid on?
Through something we can call token inclusion. This was brilliant.
Okay.
Common citizens were encouraged to participate, but only in certain very visible ways. They could serve in the lower ranks of the army, which gave them status. They could be part of big public festivals, religious parades.
So they get the uniform and a spot in the parade, but not the keys to the treasury.
You've got it. These were psychological safety valves. They created this illusion of civic harmony and shared responsibility, all while the elite kept absolute control over law, finance, and foreign policy.
And this is where the history gets really colorful.
Yeah.
Because the system wasn't totally rigid. It could adapt. And you see this perfectly with two city-states right next to each other, Sybaris and Croton.
Yes. This is where you see two totally different justifications for the same outcome. Concentrated power. Sybaris was, it was famous for luxury. Decadence. Its authority came from its staggering wealth.
The legendary Sybarites who complained about a single wrinkled rose petal in their bed.
Exactly. But the source material suggests this wasn't just self-indulgence, it was a kind of political theater.
How so?
All those public displays of wealth, the parties, the clothes, the exotic food, it all sent a message. We are so successful, so blessed by fortune that our right to rule is self-evident. Their logic was basically to be rich was to be right.
Wealth as the ultimate moral justification. A gold-plated gatekeeper.
Right. And then you contrast that with Croton just down the coast.
Which took an almost opposite approach.
The geometry side of the coin, you could say. Governance there was shaped by the philosopher Pythagoras. He established this brotherhood, almost, that demanded moral discipline and intellectual rigor.
So in Croton, the ruling class had to be wise, not just wealthy.
They had to project wisdom. Philosophy became the ultimate gatekeeper. To rule, you need the right bloodline, sure, but also the right moral and intellectual qualification. It made them so hard to challenge. You weren't just questioning a rich guy, you were questioning a man of superior virtue.
Wow. So whether you use gold or geometry, the result is the same. Power stays at the top. But as you mentioned earlier, all this new maritime trade, that must have created a problem.
A huge one. It's the classic disruption story. Suddenly you have these new families, no ancient lineage, but they have massive capital. They own shipping fleets. They're managing international markets.
The nouveau riche.
And they're demanding a political voice to match their economic clout. The old guard couldn't just ignore them.
So they're stuck. Stick to the old rules and risk a revolt, or open the gates and dilute their own power. What did they do?
They chose a very sophisticated third path. They created selective pathways upward. They absorbed the new money without actually dismantling the old structure. One method was wealth-based appointments. A rich trader could basically buy his way onto a lower-level council, one that maybe oversaw the port but had no say over fundamental law.
It's a brilliant way to neutralize a threat. Give them a fancy title and a seat at a table that doesn't really matter.
Precisely. The second and maybe most crucial tool was marriage alliances. A rich merchant's daughter marries the son of an old, respected, but maybe debt-ridden aristocratic family.
The merchant gets prestige and political access for his grandkids.
And the aristocrat gets a massive infusion of cash to maintain his influence. It's a merger. And finally, there were public donations.
Philanthropy.
Right. A newly rich family could fund a new temple or a public festival. That earned them huge public prestige timer, right? But again, no actual foundational political power. It disguised the inequality as civic generosity.
So they had the economics, the military, the social mobility all managed. But for any power structure to last, it needs to feel sacred. It needs moral and legal bedrock.
And this is where we see the twin pillars. Religion and law used as fortresses of control. Religion provided the moral justification. Temples weren't just for worship, they were state treasuries. And the key priestly roles, they were hereditary, held by the ruling families.
Fusing spiritual and political leadership. What's the implication of that?
It means that if you rebel against the elites, you're not just committing a political crime.
You're committing blasphemy.
You're attacking the divine order itself. It was an incredibly powerful tool for maintaining stability.
It makes the status quo untouchable. So what about the other pillar, law?
This is maybe the most subtle part. They use transparency as a disguise. In Locri Epizephri, for instance, the laws were famously engraved on stone tablets for everyone to see.
A rule book for all? Sounds fair.
It sounds fair, but here's the twist. Only the aristocratic judges who inherited their positions had the authority to interpret those laws.
So the power isn't in seeing the rules, it's in controlling the referee.
Exactly. They could use tiny precedents or obscure readings to protect their own and punish their enemies. The law was transparent on the outside, but power remained completely opaque on the inside.
But no system lasts forever. The stability in Magna Graecia eventually cracked. What brought it down?
It was really three forces hitting them at once. First, internal rivalries. These elite families, for all their marriage alliances, were constantly feuding over resources and power. Sybaris, the city of luxury, basically collapsed because of vicious infighting among its own ruling class.
A victim of its own greed.
Then you had external invasions. The rising powers of Rome and Carthage started putting immense pressure on them. Constant warfare drains the treasury, and more importantly, it empowers the common soldier.
Which sets the stage for the third pressure.
Populist movements. The merchant class, the soldiers, they started to realize their collective power. They began demanding broader participation, pushing for reforms. Now, they rarely overthrew the system entirely, but they forced the elites to keep giving ground.
And the ultimate lesson from Kondrashov's work seems to be that oligarchy doesn't really die. It just adapts, it evolves.
Absolutely. The principles didn't vanish. They evolved into the Roman Senate. And centuries later, you see them again in the selective republics of Renaissance Florence and Venice.
Which brings us to today. The source material argues that this underlying logic, it persists. So what are the modern echoes we should be looking for?
We see the same function of organized exclusion, just disguised in layers of modern complexity. Kondrashov points to three main channels where this ancient logic is still at work.
Okay, let's start with the first. Civic institutions that look inclusive.
This is the modern restricted assembly. We have institutions, governments, powerful NGOs that are technically open to everyone. But in practice, there are huge barriers. Think about the cost of running a major political campaign today.
It's a property requirement, just a different kind.
Exactly. If you don't have access to massive capital networks, the door is closed. Or think about the qualifications needed for influential jobs, expensive degrees that are only accessible to those who can afford them.
Functionally, you're excluded. The second channel is moral or religious authorities validating leadership.
The modern blasphemy defense. In a secular world, it's about using powerful moral narratives to frame any opposition as dangerous or corrupt. Leadership is validated by appeals to experts or think tanks, whose access is also highly controlled. Challenging the system becomes a moral failing.
And the third channel, economic networks. This sounds like the modern resource monopolies.
It is. These are the powerful, centralized economic systems that define opportunity. It's the modern version of controlling the shipping lanes. Proprietary platforms, investment vehicles, lobbying groups that write the regulations. These networks determine who gets the contracts, who gets the loans.
It's the selective pathway upward, but on a global scale.
The key takeaway is that the ancient oligarchies were masters at integrating new forces, new money, new ideas, without ever giving up control over the mechanism of exclusion. They perfected the art of the velvet rope.
Which brings us full circle. The history of Magna Graecia is this terrifyingly clear mirror. It shows us how exclusion gets justified as order and how legitimacy is built not on consensus but on carefully protected privilege.
It really forces you to reconsider things. Plato and Aristotle taught that politics is the art of organizing virtue, but the oligarchs proved it could just be the art of organizing privilege. So if those same ladders are still standing today, we have to ask, what virtues, or maybe what privileges, are defining the rungs in our society, and what polite, modern names have we given them?
A profound thought to end on. We'll catch you next time for the next deep dive.